How does the space we create in affect the resources we collect, and vice versa? And why did the Ikea look become the default acceptable aesthetic for spaces dedicated to sewing? Textile activist Shams Eldin-Rogers and I have a fun and thought-provoking conversation about fabric stashes, storage and space. As always, Shams brings her insight and wisdom as we explore many of the implications of these topics as they relate to sustainability. And we compare notes as an American and a European. This is a replay of a very popular episode that left a big impact on how I think about sewing, resources and our environment in its various manifestations. So if you haven't heard this evergreen episode, you're in for a treat. And if you did hear it first time round, it definitely stands up as full of value even a couple of years later. So stick around a few minutes for this conversation. Welcome to Check Your Thread, the podcast that will help you sew more sustainably. My name's Zoe and I'm obsessed with sewing. I've been blogging about it for over 17 years and am the creator and host of the popular handmade wardrobe challenge Me Made May. But, like many people, I've become increasingly concerned about the climate and ecological crises, and I'm looking at the way that my lifestyle contributes to them. So in this podcast, I'll be nerding out about making clothes whilst exploring how to minimise the negative impact that it may have. And I really hope you'll join me in this journey. Hello lovely one, how are you doing? Thanks for sticking with the feed whilst I took a much needed 2-week break from making the podcast. However, I didn't take a full 2 weeks off from making my other podcast, Can I Dig It? So do head over there for the 3 episodes that we've now got released on that feed. I've been away up in Scotland meeting some previous guests of Check Your Thread in real life. I got to meet Judith Staley, Gina Wigger, Mary Morton, Bevan O'Daly and Numba Pinkerton, which you can imagine was hugely exciting. I got to interview Gina and Mary live on stage in Edinburgh at the launch event for their incredible new book, Stitch It Don't Ditch It. That was a real honour. And I got to meet some incredibly lovely members of the Check Your Thread Patreon community, one of which was Kristen, who lives in New York, who happened to be over in Scotland playing a role in an excellent show at the Edinburgh Fringe, which I was able to watch with my family. And this week's sustainability win, in fact, comes from Kristen. Kristen says, I'm doing a show this year in the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. I was in charge of sourcing my costumes for the show and was able to source everything from my wardrobe, second-hand, including something I rescued from the street, and one piece I sewed up using fabric already in my stash. So no new resources were used. I'm also bringing a mending kit with me with scraps that match everyone's costumes in case we need it during the run of our show. How good is that? I'm personally still buzzing from meeting Kristen, her husband, and all the other lovely, amazing patrons and previous guests. It was an incredibly special break that I will never forget. Speaking of patrons, whilst I've been away, these incredible people have been stepping up to help guarantee the production of new episodes going forward. Massive thanks to Amanda, Joanna and Claire for signing up to support the podcast, and to existing patron Bridget for upping the amount of their support. What absolute angels. So the next 4 episodes, including this one, will be replays of popular episodes from the second year of the podcast. And Check Your Thread turns 4 this month, in fact. If you want to help support the production of new episodes from September onwards, please consider helping me cover the costs and some of my time that it takes to make Check Your Thread. So please go to patreon.com/checkyourthread to see what goes on over there and to sign up for an amount that makes sense to you. So as I say, the next 4 episodes, including this one, are repeats of popular episodes, chosen because they each represent an important aspect of sewing more sustainably. This one was the 3rd episode featuring Shams, and there have been 5 so far in total. If you'd like more Shams on Check Your Thread action, I've linked to all her episodes in the show notes that you can see in your podcast app right now. So here's an update from Shams that she sent me last week. Shams says, please tell your listeners that I'm doing a great job on the fabric stash reduction, aided by Last Sew Standing. Last year and this year, I've bought no new garment sewing fabric. This included not buying during a 4-week trip to Europe. I also organised and inventoried my embroidery threads and fabrics, kitting things up into project bags so that they are ready to go when called for. Please tell your listeners I'm proud of myself and that my organisation system allows me to have better control of what I buy and also find what I need in my stash without a lot of mucking around. And Shams has also recently created a new challenge for herself that others are welcome to participate in to help reduce the amount of crafting supplies entering their craft rooms. It has an Instagram hashtag $1,200 a year, and that's 1,200 in numericals. which is the spending cap that Shams is placing on crafting and clothing purchases. If you're a multi-crafter, this one might work well for you, rather than having to juggle different challenges all related to different crafts. My feeling is that you could easily take this idea and run with it, rather than use the parameters that Shams has set out for herself. For example, if you're on a lower budget and or you work in a different currency, then think about an amount that suits you better. You can find out more about this challenge on Shams's Instagram grid, which is linked in the show notes. So, until next week, take care of yourselves, your loved ones, and those in the wider global community who need our help. Do make sure you visit patreon.com/checkyourthread if you want to get more involved in the production of this podcast. And enjoy! Thank you so much for doing this again.
I'm really happy to be back with you, Zoe. The work that you're doing is very important, and it also aligns with what I feel is my purpose as well, so I'm really glad.
Wonderful. You must know that you've had such an amazing impact on the last time that you were on the podcast. I got so much amazing feedback.
I'm really happy. A lot of people wrote me personally to tell me that this or this other comment or idea meant something to them. I've also started working with a collective in Toronto, the Works in Progress Toronto. So it's a collective of artists who like to make things out of things that would otherwise be trash. I'm not yet a member of their collective, but I'm now working with them and learning from them. And also they got to hear the podcast episode too. It's really very nice.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. Yeah, I'm so grateful. You've touched so many people. I've had so many people saying it blew me away. I've listened to that episode multiple times. It made me cry.
Wow. I'm glad to be able to be a helper on the planet in whatever ways that we can do here.
Yeah, well, I think exploring all these ideas, especially when these are ideas that, probably aren't being discussed enough. I think this is so magical that we can make this happen. So thank you so much again for giving me some of your time.
I'm really glad.
So today we are going to touch on the topics of stashes and spaces, which I'm so excited to hear what you have to say about it. So first of all, I just want to say that we are coming from this. I hope people who are regular listeners will assume this already, but we are coming at this topic from like a zero judgment space. We're not judging anybody for owning anything. We're not talking about ideals. We just want to explore the relationships and the feelings and things surrounding these topics, wouldn't you say?
I would say definitely, but I will leave space to judge myself.
Yeah, right. So let's get into it. Let's talk about stashes. So what's your current relationship with your fabric or crafting stash?
I feel that my stash has grown over the last 25, maybe 27 years. And I started out when I was in graduate school and didn't have a lot of available cash. I started going to thrift stores and only occasionally buying something new in terms of new fabric. But after getting out of graduate school and getting my first job as a teacher in 2001, I also worked while I was in graduate school, but getting my first full-time job, I looked at that as an opportunity to buy some things. And I gave myself a budget of only $100 a month for craft supplies. And $100 a month, and this is now on 2022, I have a lot of things, because if you're knitting with thick yarn, you can knit up $100 worth of yarn in a couple of evenings.
Wow.
But if you're knitting with thin yarn, you're going to need more time to knit it up. And if you've been buying it on sale or at garage sales, then obviously the amount of time it takes you to knit up or sew up each $100 gets greater and greater. And during this time also, people began to look at giving me things as an opportunity to divest themselves of their stashes.
About that, or how did you feel about that?
Certainly in the beginning, again, when I was new to it or in graduate school, I needed these things. So this was wonderful. Then when I got my first house, I bought a 4-bedroom house as my first house, and I had one room for knitting and one room for sewing.
Wow.
In addition to, I had a summer bedroom and a winter bedroom in that house. So I didn't mind more fabric coming in. That's great. Come on.
Yeah.
When I bought my second house, it was a little smaller. I had 2 bedrooms. One of them, though, was a combined bedroom, and it was just for sewing. So if guests came, they had to sleep on the couch. This was not a combination sewing and guest room. This was Ikea metal baskets all the way to the ceiling with stash.
Right.
Then more stash coming. I kept thrift sailing. I kept going to the Salvation Army or the Ann Arbor PTO thrift shop, parent teacher organization thrift shop. And again, people giving it to me, they knew they had too much, but I didn't know I had too much. Traveling overseas, sometimes you're in a country where you won't be able to go again. Yeah. So I'm getting more fabric there because I know I won't be back there to get more of whatever it is they have there. Then 2 major stash entrances came. My mother-in-law, who was a celebrated quilter, I got a lot of stash from her, about 14 tubs, big tubs.
Whoa!
And then a teacher at a school that I was, they closed down home ec, and she gave me home ec. She gave me as much as she could from the home ec room, saying, I know you teach, I know you give workshops, I know you're always doing it for free. Just take it, put it in your personal stash, or do whatever you want with it. So I'm giving everybody seam rippers, I'm giving everybody scissors, I'm giving everybody tape measures, and giving everybody fabric. But all of my fabric acquisition, plus the other fabric acquisition, when we moved into this house in Toronto, there were 104 boxes of craft supplies or craft books. And we're saying a big old box. And there's been more since then. I've no longer needed to buy $100 per month. I've had to just say no. But stuff keeps coming in for free. People are calling me saying, oh, my mom has passed away. Do you want the clothes and fabric, or can you find it to rehome? So I take it and I'm going through it. I'm washing it. I'm sending it out to go to this refugee organization or this family that has just had a fire. But also I'm taking some of it and sewing it myself. It's out of control right now. There's just no other. So you say, what's my relationship with it? I love the fact that I've acquired things, such as going out into the street when somebody has put an umbrella out there for trash pickup, a large patio umbrella with my scissors and harvesting that canvas. Yeah. That's great. I've got to go to a painting party at someone's house, and they said, go to Dollar Village or something and buy a canvas. I go, I got a canvas here. I got all this canvas from this thing. But this can't continue to go on. So my relationship with my stash is, I love it, but it's too large.
Right. So you are actually involved in a couple of challenges related to your stash at the moment,
exactly.
aren't you? Can you talk to me about those?
So I'm succeeding very well in 2 contests. One of them is called The Last Sewist Standing. That's by Miss Tashley. And this started in February. And she's asked people, if you want to participate, you can't buy anything at all. The heavyweight category says no sewing related things whatsoever. No thread, no patterns, no nothing. So that's the heavyweight. And you can also drop out of the heavyweight but stay in the competition if you just don't buy fashion fabric. But you can buy lining, interfacing patterns, or whatever.
Okay, what league are you in?
I'm in the lightweight, not the heavyweight, because I went to the Textile Museum of Canada, and it has a room where you can buy fabric and books and things that have been donated at very good prices. I bought several pattern books. I also bought 3 episodes of Tauko magazine. So that makes me in the lightweight. But in terms of thread or anything that's textile, we don't need any of that stuff right now. And I don't know how far it's going to go. She said that last summer it went into September. I can go for the foreseeable future without buying any fashion fabric.
I love this.
We'll see how that proceeds.
Do you know how many people started and how many people are still going?
It doesn't say. The posting is kind of people just signing in and saying hi without a number being counted. But as far as I know, lots of people are still in it. And, if somebody's listening to me and they're just starting out and they're saying, how does that ever happen? Well, I told you how it happens. And then, you mentioned, Zoe, in one of our conversations about the space in North America. Before I talk about the second challenge that I'm in, I wanted to remind people that the kind of sizes of houses that people live in North America is often very different to the rest of the world. And I told you, when I bought my first house, I was still in my 20s, I bought a 4-bedroom house. I think our house has 7 bedrooms.
Right.
No, it has 6 bedrooms, sorry. But, we're talking about big spaces.
Yeah.
And so you have room for a lot of stuff that doesn't need to be there. So when Pink Mimosa by Jacinta has got a challenge, which is called Whole 30 Challenge, and you're supposed to sew up or give away 30 yards of fabric. Or if you're in a meter country, go ahead and do meters. It's not worth the calculation in most cases.
Yeah.
And I had joined it before, but I'm not sewing up as much new fabric. However, in her more recent iteration, she said that you can also donate fabric and it still counts against your total for your whole 30. Well, I went on just a partial clear up of the stash. I'm certain that 200 yards were given away. So I'm way in the finished for that, and I can just wait for her new version of the challenge.
Wow. Well done. That's amazing.
Thank you. But it doesn't, as before, it doesn't look like anything has happened in the craft room. It looks like nothing is different. And so that's depressing. How did I get rid of the fabric? I gave to the works in progress. We had a banner making day, and you may have seen on my YouTube that we made banners and things. And I brought out lots of fabric, and we made banners with some, and also some people took some. I took lots of fabric to school, and usually when you ask the people, how do you spend your days, they talk about their paid occupation, and I teach 3rd grade at a French immersion school, and for their art class, I've been teaching them textile arts all semester, so the students all know how to sew by hand, and they all know how to knit and macrame. And so quite a few students have taken fabric from my stash. And I'd also like to talk about your involvement in my students' textile education. On your blog, you have been collecting free patterns, and there is a section, you've got a couple sections for children's free patterns for younger kids and older kids. So I put that onto their classroom computer library, and they have been looking at them, and some are printing out some shorts that they are trying to do. Remember, these children are only 8 years old.
This is making me so happy.
Oh, good. So they're only 8 years old. Some of them are 9. So it needs parental or teacher help to tape together the patterns. It's that they want to do it, but they don't always have the precision. But they're taping them together. And some of them have just started wrapping fabric around themselves at the parts of the body that they think should be decorated, and then using some yarn to tie it on. So they've just got, a skirt made of some fabric. So do you want to finish the edges? No, I like this. So yes, thank you for providing that resource.
Oh,
and
that's made me so happy. When you work on something and you don't know if anyone's even going to look at it. So that's really nice that that it's being used. That's wonderful. I love that, and I love that. I mean, even if they're not that interested in neatening the edges, the fact that you are encouraging them to think of themselves as creators, as people who can be involved in the creation of what goes on their body, that's pretty powerful.
I'm so thrilled. My whole life I've been teaching in secondary or higher ed, and when I came to Canada and they had a need for French teachers, people said, they have a greater need for elementary teachers. I said, I'm not an elementary teacher. What do I know? But I'm so excited and happy that I can use some of this concern for the environment that we've talked about before, and you've seen me posting about working with the kids, understanding polyester is plastic, you're wearing plastic, and talking also about, though, the effects that natural fibers can have on the environment, that it's not just enough to say, okay, well, this isn't polyester, it isn't nylon, so we're good to go, and to talk about waste and stuff. So it's really fun to say we have standards that we need to adhere to, and some of those standards are becoming a creator. And so then I can choose to interpret that in the way that I want as a teacher and as an artist. I was at first frightened, I'm going to teach art. How am I going to do this? I said, wait, you are an artist. you have a body of work in one particular medium, so let's go with that. And it's going great. Thank you for putting that up there. And I also know you have 2 episodes about sewing for children and sewing with children. So I'm making those available to the parents as well, so that they can, because the parents can go on the links, whatever links you give the kids, the parents can log on. And so that is available as well. So thank you for that.
Oh, no worries. I'm going to go and I'm going to update those blog posts now, because I'm like, I wonder if some of those links need refreshing. So I'll go and see if I can add any more and remove any ones.
Well, thank you.
Dead links and stuff. So in terms of your relationship with your stash, what is the goal? So what do you feel would be the ideal relationship?
I've decided to renovate my basement atelier, so that represents, we can say, one of the bedrooms in the house, but it's really big. And I've been sewing in it sporadically. I also have what was the master bedroom of the house as my upstairs studio, but I need much more space than that. So I've been sewing in the basement. I also been sewing in the basement because we have a political opposition to air conditioning, my husband and I. We believe that air conditioning is bad for the environment. No, I'm not judging you, listeners. I'm saying we believe. So we don't use air conditioning. We are concerned that what if the neighbor's kid is outside playing and falls and hurts their leg and no one can hear them? Everyone's windows are closed. What's the point, we feel, of living in a city if everything you do is to disconnect yourself from the humans that are out there? So we had the air conditioning taken away when we bought this house. We had the ducts taken away, and we don't use air conditioning, but it's mighty, mighty hot in the west-facing second floor in the warm weather. So I've been sewing down there, and I've got tables there. The lighting isn't sufficient. The storage isn't well organized. It's really just a bunch of garage shelves with these tubs that I mentioned earlier, the ubiquitous tubs, with these tubs of fabric sitting on them. It's not the way I want. So my plan is to redo that whole basement and change the lighting, replace the bathroom, which I think is about 80 years old, and we've been told the shower is leaking down into the foundation of the house. Just get everything fixed up there, and that can't happen until the stash is somewhat controlled, because in order to take it and put it outside so they can do this work, we have to put it into some kind of a rented pod or something for them to do this work. It needs to be contained. It can't be spilling out of these boxes because there's too much of it. So I'm trying to limit the stash right now. I've been going through it. I've been deciding first, if it's cotton, it has to meet a very high bar to be able to stay.
Right. So this is the criteria for what's going to stay and what's going to go. Cool. Okay.
If it's cotton, it has to meet a very high bar to be allowed to stay, because there's so much cotton, and because I don't mostly sew with cotton. I mostly sew with linen, silk, and wool. If it's knit cotton, it can stay. It may get made into gym clothes or something. Then there's also a lot of the linen, hemp, and wool, and also silk. So it has to be examined as to whether there has an upcoming use for that, or it's a pretty color, but it's not the colors that I'm going to wear.
Yeah. I was going to say, do you have a color palette in mind when you're selecting?
I like royal blue, hot pink. I also like some nature colors that are closer to the colors the fibers would be. And I don't need very much yellow, green, and deep brown in my wardrobe. So those are related to it, but often it's patterns that are an issue. Right. So I'll have a pattern that's a beautiful pattern in and of itself, but let's be honest. What do you really see yourself wearing from this pattern? Putting it up to my body, saying, how do I feel about this? Do I like the way it hangs? Does the drape mean anything to me? Sometimes saying, it's beautiful, but no. And so for some of those, instead of just making them a donation I'm calling friends and saying, do you want this length? Here's the picture, send them it in the email or the text message. Here's the picture of what it looks like. Do you want this? Because some of it's expensive and valuable, but it just can't stay.
You don't want it just to sit somewhere. You want someone to use it and enjoy it.
Right.
And if it's lovely, then you want to get it into the right hands, don't you?
Yeah. And then there's also things that are not original fabric, but that are intended for upcycling that are in my life, but that also have to go, such as I have some quilts from my aunt's house, and I cleared out my aunt's house of the textiles recently. So there's other things around that aren't clothing fabric, but that are taking up space and have to go. So my ultimate goal is to have the lighting correct so that I can see without glare or other difficulties, and to have storage for whatever stash is remaining in a way that is organized and that feels ethical. I went back, I listened to your episode 8 again, where you said, what is sustainability? And we're addressing each person has to make these decisions. What is going to be the sustainability? What is going to be the ethical choices for you? I don't think it's good for me to just go to Ikea and order everything and buy a creating area when there are things available that could be used.
Yeah.
And so people often talk about what do they want for their sewing room, but I also want it to be sustainable for my health and my husband's health, and as much as possible for the planet. So I can go on the websites such as Craigslist or Kijiji, which is kind of a specific Canadian version of Craigslist, and there, any type of Ikea shelf that you want, there are many of those on offer throughout the Greater Toronto area. And I have a van. We've talked before about my having a camper van. You can fit these things inside. So by having too much stash, I'd be using more gas going to more people's house to get their thing, to get their shelf units. And then I'd be paying more people to bring it into my basement. Also, and thinking, how else can I be as sustainable as possible? I saved drywall and I saved dimensional lumber from the previous renovations. I saved as much as I could without being overflowing. So as much as possible, I'd like those things to be redone. And when you think about the flooring in a sewing space, I've been reading some books about sewing spaces and going on to blogs and Pinterest and so forth. And people often tell you, you should use resilient vinyl on your floor in your sewing space because that is better for your knees and legs. So that's attractive. I hear that. But resilient vinyl, it's plastic. It off-gasses, and it's not helpful on the long run for the planet. So I've considered ceramic tiles, and my friend has suggested, why don't you just use rugs on the areas where you would need to stand? You don't have to go to this luxury vinyl, they call it. But also I found out that you have companies that can come over and polish your existing concrete that you already have on the basement floor. After we took up that moldy carpet, they can polish your basement floors, and then it can be painted with porch, deck, and floor paint. So the volume of what's coming to your house is a can of paint or 2 cans of paint, as opposed to the stacks and stacks of boxes of tile, or the stacks and stacks of, again, that resilient luxury vinyl, which just seems beyond the pale. So in renovating, I'm definitely going in the direction of the concrete.
I love this so much because this is really, basically, I've been doing a bit of work writing a manifesto for the podcast and for my own life, really. And it's kind of the fundamental of it is my goal is to make sustainability a consideration in every single decision that is made, and to encourage that. And I love that because this is really that in practicality, like you are considering the sustainability of every aspect of this renovation as it relates to yourself and as it relates to your space and your requirements. So this is really fascinating. So it does seem that like the kind of IKEA look seems to be like the look of sewing spaces somehow, isn't it? How did that come about? Like, I mean, it can look great and I'm not knocking it in any way, but it does seem to be, that's almost like the kind of the given aesthetic these days. That's how it seems to be anyway. What do you think?
Well, I think as when we talked on the last podcast too about what we see in the social media, what we see reflected in the homes of people who have the money and they have the internet, they have the computers, and obviously globally that's just not the case. And globally, most people don't have room after room that they can design to their own dream. But IKEA is a kind of a middle income operation. You can go in there and you can buy furniture that's not offensive, that's not going to cause your mother-in-law to make complaints about you and her son's mistake with this girl with no taste. It's all okay. So I have a rule that there can be no more than one piece of IKEA in any room in the house except the sewing room. IKEA has its own take on Scandinavian modern. For me, I only allow one piece per room except the sewing room. So sewing room, it's easy because a lot of times you want a light colored sewing room. You want the light to allow you to see very well. And
you want to drop a pin and you want to be able to find it again.
Right. And you want to see the colors of your work, perhaps not as much influenced by the colors of the wall and ceiling and your soft textiles and so forth. So you can go to IKEA and you can have a whole match set of, laminates on top of your furniture. And if you don't move a lot, it's great. And even if you move a few times, the things often will stay together very well. So I like to go for a secondhand IKEA unit. Sometimes I've had firsthand as well, but a secondhand unit, you can go to it, you can look at it, and you can see what condition it's in, and you know that it'll go okay with the rest of the laminate covered particle board or whatever they've got in their straw board that they've got in there. So I think a lot of people like that. I also, when I follow certain Facebook groups, like Clean and Organized Sewing Room, for example, I also hear people aspiring to that. They're saying, I don't have the money yet, but when I get it, I'm going to go to IKEA. This is my dream sewing room. So I think people continue to reinforce each other. But when you look into, again, the print media, or you go to people's homes, I think there's also, at least in my country, there's more of this kind of a country style where there's exposed honey-colored wood, a lot of wood paneling. And the country style has a lot of adherence in North America, at least. And you can often get the furniture at a good used price. So you may be able to furnish a lot of your sewing room from grandma's leftovers. And as the baby boomers are passing away and their children are dealing with the remainders, a lot of that can be obtained very cheaply. So my goal for what I have is that I've bought some of those things from where grandma was passing away, and her tables and setup of wood are there. And I've got some wood paneling already in that room that's going to stay. There's a lot of pressure. We've talked about this before, and I know other people have talked about this before. When we look at any medium, whether it's social media or the more traditional media, such as the television, they are lying about how much money and how many resources and how much space people actually have. People don't go in each other's houses, and we've had 2 years even of barely ever going in anyone's houses, but we still see these houses that someone is curating the image of. Look, I'm not going to show you an image of my ragtag sewing room, right? I'm going to clean it up, make it look nice. If I feel embarrassed about it, I'm not going to show it. This is all curated. And then people are at home thinking, I need to renovate. I need to change. And it may be just a little thing. It may be that all you need to do is polish the floor and paint it. You may not have to completely change something physically. So I'm trying to use resources that I already have that can fit in. And I hope to encourage people who are listening, and people who don't hear us now, maybe they'll listen to your podcast in 10 years. They'll be going back to these double-digit episodes, and that they'll say, right, it doesn't matter if I have a budget big enough to buy new stuff. Do we have an earth big enough for everybody to buy new stuff all the goddamn time? And so that's what I am trying to do myself, and also encourage other people.
Yeah. I wonder if there's a space for some kind of sewing space amnesty where we just show really honest photos of what we're actually dealing with.
I am making faces as if I've got the vapors. Okay.
You're not okay right now.
I'm saying.
I'll go first.
Okay. You can go first on your sewing amnesty, and you have so many lovely followers that I'm sure some of them will also go on Sewing Space Amnesty. But I don't want pictures of my mess to live forever. And
it's not compulsory.
It's good. I think more than Sewing Space Amnesty, let's say.
Sewing Space Reality.
Sewing Space Reality. Okay, I would like to see people's DIY or stooping. There's an account here, Stooping Toronto, where they go around telling you if they've seen any free stuff on the street. And other people also text in with photos they're seeing in the address. I would love to see someone's street gathered sewing space.
That's basically mine.
Okay, good. I thought your sewing space was mostly the dining room.
It is, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So it is. So yeah. So this is interesting, isn't it? And we're kind of in a way representing the kind of I mean, I am very privileged in my own way in that I have a space where I can keep my machine up all the time. Mm-hmm. And that is a privilege in and of itself. But I guess I more represent, and once again, this is a generalization, the European amount of space for craft. And I have it's a 1950s kitchen table, like a Formica top that my sewing machine and my overlocker live on, but it's not very wide, so I have to like switch, depending on which machine I want to use. And then I have 4 big hideous Ikea tubs that I have had for over 20 years. They're all duct taped together and they've got all my scraps in. And then I have a small ropey little set of shelves that I got from when a friend was moving out and no longer wanted them, and they've got my binders of patterns in. And I just bought new. I did look for best part of a year for an equivalent secondhand and nothing came up. When I can't get something secondhand that is suitable and new becomes then the next option, I will buy the best quality that I can afford because it's going to last me as long as possible. So I have this beautiful larder that I bought at the beginning of the year that is kind of navy blue. It's like a wardrobe basically, but with shelves inside, and that contains a lot of stuff and it's beautiful and I'm going to have it forever. And for my birthday, I think it was last year, my husband found like a 1960s sewing box that I keep my, my notions in. So that's it. But that's not where my fabric lives. My fabric lives on a shelf in our airing cupboard in the bathroom.
A shelf?
A shelf. It's a deep shelf. A shelf.
I'm applying.
But it feels, so this is the thing. This is what I find so interesting in that I feel I have too much. I feel I have too much fabric because it is still bursting from the space that I have. So I'm on a mission to reduce my stash. Like I've catalogued everything that I've got. I've got it on a Trello board on my phone. Mm-hmm. So any ideas I have that might be relevant to those items, I catalogue those ideas. My goal is to use, because it's based on my sewing output naturally, but my goal is to use one piece of fabric or garment for refashioning every 2 weeks, which is roughly the amount. Generally, I'm making like one thing every 2 weeks.
You have some humans that you grew in your womb that are continuing to grow. So
that's where a lot of my sewing is going at the moment. Yeah.
Right. So I'm listening to you and I'm saying, wow. Again, I'm speaking from a perspective of an American who's living in Canada, certainly not a European. When I lived in Europe, I also did have a sewing machine with me, but I have a lot of space, as we discussed earlier. So when we're talking about the equipment that I have that I use for sewing, I have a cutting table, which is made from those Ikea Kallax shelves with an extension table above it so it can be lengthened, so a cutting table. The reason it can be lengthened is I wear a lot of long garments that go from shoulder to ankle, and so I need a longer table to be able to cut those out and not have the fabric part of it draping over the edge. I also have a pressing table which has got the big square ironing board that I got from a neighbor when they were downsizing.
Yeah.
I have, in terms of tables for sewing on, an old kitchen table, the wooden one that I reduced the legs on. I have a shaped table to fit in the window into a bay window on shelves. I have a 9 feet of table for the serger, and if I want to use the AccuQuilt die cutter, I also have a 10-foot unit with tables and holes for sewing machines. Another table that has a sewing machine built into it. In terms of sewing machines, and so we're having amnesty, I have 2 computerized Husqvarna sewing machines. I have 3 vintage Husqvarna sewing machines. I have a Singer hand crank and a Singer treadle.
Wow.
I think that's all.
I literally have worked in sewing schools, smaller and less well equipped.
Oh, I have an iron press.
What's an iron press?
It's a big flat iron. I think you guys might call it a mangle, and you push like this.
Oh, no, a mangle is like 2 rollers.
Oh, okay. No, I had that, but I sold that. So the iron press is when you want to fuse, or you just have a big piece of yardage. And some people are real ambitious, and they do like their husband's shirts in it.
That's bold. I have used one of those when I had a job for a while making hats, and it was like to fuse the interfacing onto the brims of the hats. Yeah,
you could do that with it too. I have those things, and I didn't mention the knitting, the embroidery, the beads, and the
let's stick to sewing right now.
Yeah, let's just stick to those. I also have a loom here, which I took a class in, but I still don't really know how to use properly. So,
which is not to say I'm not envious of a lot of it. It's like I would love to be able to keep my ironing board up permanently, but I can't. I have to take it down otherwise. Or sometimes I leave it up because the cat's sitting on it or whatever. But so it's not to say that I wouldn't like a bit more space, but then I worry that I would never put anything away.
Well, it's not environmentally sound. Okay, so my situation is I'm married to a concert pianist. We needed a house which was not attached to anybody else's house so that the sounds of the piano don't echo through the other people. Their kid is trying to nap, for the love of God. And you've got this person with all this power banging on this huge thing. So in doing so, you also need 9-foot ceilings. And in doing that, you wind up with a bigger house than perhaps some other ones. This is not the biggest house at all in Toronto, but this is bigger than some. So you've got all these spaces. Also, I insisted on having a sewing space. I had maintained a sewing space ever since I bought that first house. And I wasn't going to live with a man if I wasn't going to have a space for me to do my art.
Yeah.
That said, having rooms that you don't live in, that you only go into to do the crafts a certain number of hours per day, you're paying to heat that space. You're certainly paying taxes on that space. There's a housing shortage. We could just put in proper egress windows. Somebody could live there. And so it's not without cost to the planet that people are doing this. Yet and still, many of my sewing buddies have the same thing. They have a whole basement kitted out, or they have a master bedroom and another bedroom. Many of my buddies, we're talking women over 40 with disposable income. That's something that would be prevalent in North America. And I read about the spending. They said that on average, the women who have craft as a major pastime are spending $300 and more per month on their hobby. And that was put out by, I believe, the craft yarn industry consultants, I believe. This is a big, big business. And you can buy sewing room equipment from other companies. It's far more expensive than the Ikea ones. And they have these contraptions that open as closets.
Oh, I've seen those. Yeah. It's like a shop inside.
Yes. And then they have things that when you sit on them, your sewing machine rises out of the table with an air push. When you open the sides, you have like a little table. So for you to be switching your things, instead, you'd have this table that usually looks like a minding its own business little table. And then when you get ready, when you open it up, you've got the shelf on the side and your serger comes up. You have your sewing machine come up and you have all these threads and interfacings and all that. And then at the end, you just put that thing away. And so that would be the beginning. But you can go far, because like everything else, everything's big.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that those things exist for people, for example, with mobility issues. Perhaps they can't lift machines and stuff, but I didn't realize it went that deep, that there were that many specifically designed products out there for people to dispose of their income on.
Yes. And when you go to the expos, there are various places throughout North America. And then the manufacturers come and they have these pavilions where they are attempting to convince you that their product is good. And frequently their product is good. I'm not saying their products are bad.
Yeah.
I'm saying that I have a lot of them. I said at the beginning of this, I'm not judging other people, but judging myself. I'm not planning to move out of this house. I'm not planning to give it to the Huron-Wendat or the Mississauga or the New Credit or the Petun First Nation, whose land was stolen to make Toronto. I'm acknowledging that it's theirs and that I'm also a stolen person who's here because slavery created a race of people, so-called African Americans. And I don't have another place to go. I don't have a homeland to go to where I can go to Italy and ask to be repatriated under the European Union rules, where I could take a couple lessons of Italian or a few years even and take an exam and then be admitted to my home. This is all I've got. So I'm not giving it back because I don't have anywhere else to go either. But I'm acknowledging that it's still bad. At the same time, I built a tiny house. Did I tell you about the tiny house before?
No, tell me about the tiny house.
You know, the little tiny houses on wheels?
Yes, I'm obsessed with watching programs about them.
So I built a tiny house. I don't say I built. I did almost none of the hammering. I paid to have this built. And I have it in my backyard in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And it's legally a craft studio. Then I was teaching overseas, and I came home 2 summers, and I stayed in my tiny house while I had renters in the main house. And I did do crafts. I did do knitting out there, and I did have craft books out there, and that's all very nice until I fell in love with somebody that has to live with a grand piano. Okay, but I aspire to tiny living.
Interesting.
But I have even more craft things that if you packed all of them in, they wouldn't fit all into the tiny house.
Right, okay, so stop there. Let's unpack this a bit. So you've got that, because you have that experience of tiny house living, that is like, you know what that was like. I mean, when you speak about, you were talking about you have friends that have a similar situation to yourself. Perhaps they have a whole basement or a spare bedroom that they use as their craft space. Mm-hmm. Do you think that the way that you feel about your space is represented? I know obviously we can't talk for other people, but when you're speaking with them, do they feel similarly? Like, would they like to be able to potentially downsize to that extent?
I do have some friends interested in tiny house living, but they don't overlap with the friends with the extensive in-home studios. It's really interesting. And, when we talk about women's rights and women's power, when I first bought my first house, I was one of the few women I know who bought a house without ever having been married or living with a man, who saved her down payment and bought her house, and it was just hers, and she could make it as craft palace if she wanted. Most of my friends who have this space are either living together with a partner of the male kind or divorced from or widowed from a partner of the male kind. So then they have these houses that are larger than. It's not a condo anymore. It's a big house. And especially in some of them, they've had children to grow up. And now they've got these extra rooms, and your choices are you going to sell that house, move somewhere else? How are you going to take care of the house? How are you going to deal with the steps as you're getting older? So my friends who are in the houses with the big stash of creative products, when they discuss downsizing, they're discussing it from the question of, am I going to be able to maintain this house as I get older? Am I going to be able to access the basement stairs or the attic or wherever they have their room? Even my thrifty friends, I think, are not moving to divest themselves of the great amount of space unless they're feeling it's aging. Whereas my friends who are trying to have reduced spaces are usually already reducing in other ways.
Interesting. So the Venn diagram, you're the only one in the middle.
Well, yes, I guess, but they also, for all I know, maybe they're dreaming of smaller spaces and they just haven't gotten on a podcast and told all their friends. I mean, I think it's difficult, and I just talked about the intersection of gender and about heterosexual relationships and about space. You know, the tiny house movement in North America, it started out with an architect who was a man. Mm-hmm. And people started following this guy, and physically building the tiny house is also kind of a great man task in the way we think about time in North America. We often think that men spend their weekends building stuff. And art of any practice, most practices of art take up a lot of space. If you're going to run a sculpture studio, and so I have a friend and former colleague who built a sculpture studio over her garage. If you're going to have the weaving, if you're going to have, I guess, painting, all of these things require space for you to do your art. And for the women who are fortunate enough to have that space to do their art, I see very few people wanting to give that up.
Yes. Oh, that's so true. That's so complicated. I'm very lucky that I do consider my husband an artist, but he's a writer, which I think is the one exception to what you were saying. He's very self-care. He's got like a laptop and a shelf of books.
Well, yeah, I was saying just one shelf. I was wondering, don't they have lots and lots of bookshelves? Where they?
He don't know. We have 3 bookshelves, 3 in our home, but one of them's mainly my sewing books and craft books. So yeah, we have a lot. We have to have an in and out. We can't hoard. Not hoard's the wrong one. We can't kind of keep things for long. Like if we don't really love them.
Well, I think the word hoard is really interesting. And even the word stash, when I grew up, I'm talking about in Detroit, I'm talking about near to or even next door to drug houses and drug areas. Right. The word stash is a drug reference.
Yeah.
The stash is where you keep the drug paraphernalia, and that's kind of the street life that, even though my family isn't part of the street life, we lived right next door to it. So the word stash is already kind of negative, kind of pejorative in connotation.
That's so true. Why did we start using it about fabric and yarn?
I don't know, but it still carries that connotation, or that connotation to me when I'm thinking, when you say, I don't want to say the word hoard, and I'm assuming you're thinking about pirates or dragons that have excesses of things and they call those their hoard. And so I don't want to say hoard, so I'm going to say stash. I'm like, well, you didn't do much better, so when you're saying
isn't that interesting? Yeah.
But, what if we said resource? Or when I talk with my students, I don't talk about stash. They say, Miss, can we have some? And they have to use the correct French word for whether they're asking for tissu or laine or fil. They're asking for these they have to ask for the right thing. And I don't use the word stash in English. And I don't even know the word stash in French, so they're certainly not getting that. I say, okay, we'll get some from the resources.
Right. So let's rebrand stash as resource.
Right. Let's think about if we were a company and we were using just-in-time sources, we would buy the raw materials or the things that are needed for our products approximately at the time we need them, so that there wouldn't be large expenses of storage. And keeping the notebook on Trello. So I followed you. I listened to you when you made the comment about Trello, and then you helpfully answered us to tell us what this was. I went to several other people. So I've been using the Trello. But we just know there's no way to catalog all this fabric. We're out of control. There's no way to catalog this stuff in the Trello. But what if somebody switched, or somebody who was at the beginning, or somebody like me even, I don't even know how we get there, but somebody switched to saying, let's have some resources, and we're going to acquire them sustainably and thriftily. We still would have a few more than a just-in-time, because some of them are going to come from yard sales or something that happens in the summer, at least where I live, that doesn't happen in the winter. So you're going to need to get enough for the winter also. So, but what if we just said, let's have what we need for a year?
Yes, I think that's my goal. Yeah.
That's not a hoard then. Those are your resources.
Agreed. I think I would like to get to a position where I have, say, 10, I don't know what I'm plucking this number out, 10 or fewer pieces of fabric in my stash resource center. And then as I see something that I like, I'm then going to acquire it and then use it within like 6 months. I think for me, that would be, I don't know where I'm plucking these feelings from, but that for me feels like a good set of circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
Currently, I haven't checked my Trello board recently, but I believe I have about 20 pieces of fabric for adult clothing, or earmarked for adult clothing, 20 pieces earmarked for children's clothing, and about 25 garments to either harvest the fabric from or reuse in some way. I would really like that to be less. I feel a bit uncomfortable about that quantity. Why do I feel uncomfortable with that quantity? I guess part of it's space. I don't know why I've got this arbitrary number of like I should have 10 or fewer pieces. I'm not sure.
Well, we like 10. You're waving 10 fingers at me while you're saying this. I mean, we like 10. And so we like that. We count on base 10. I'm with you on the 10. That's a great idea. Okay, I'm going to make a plan. You can all witness. I would like to fit my fabric resources into no more than 3 packs wardrobes.
Right. Is that an IKEA wardrobe?
Yes, it's an IKEA. It's a large, tall IKEA wardrobe.
I'm literally ecosiering that as we speak.
Okay.
Let me see. Oh, okay. So...
But the main one, not the double ones, 3 of the main size. So the ones where the doors fold open, the 2 that fold open like this.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Only 3 of those. And you're like, okay, that sounds like a lot more than 10 for adults and 10 for kids. I'm just saying the fabric has to...
You don't have to use my...
Well, I can't anyway. We've just gone over that. I can't. If they can't fit into the 3 paxes, they have to be gone away. Oh, they're telling us we're leaving the session in 55 seconds. Oh no. Oh. So does that
mean... I don't know how to stop that.
Okay, well, we can say goodbye to each other. We know we're going to have more conversations, and I am looking forward to more of it.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye-bye now.
Thanks so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this episode and are left feeling inspired. For more info about the podcast, including show notes for this and every episode, head to checkyourthread.com. I'd love to hear from you, so if you have any comments, questions or ideas for future episodes, please get in touch by emailing zoe@checkyourthread.com or find me on Instagram @checkyourthread. Massive thanks to Patrick Potter for production support, to Sylvia Seller for the awesome logo design, and to Simon at Palm Skin Productions for the music. This ad-free podcast would not be possible without listener support, so if you feel you are able, please consider signing up to the Check Your Thread Patreon. For the equivalent of buying me a coffee each month, you'll be making it possible to continue producing regular episodes. Links can be found in the show notes and on the website checkyourthread.com. I hope you'll listen again next week. Until then, take care. Bye! Thanks so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this episode and are left feeling inspired. For more info about the podcast, including show notes for this and every episode, head to checkyourthread.com. I'd love to hear from you, so if you have any comments, questions or ideas for future episodes, please get in touch by emailing zoe@checkyourthread.com or find me on Instagram @checkyourthread. Massive thanks to Patrick Potter for production support, to Sylvia Seller for the awesome logo design, and to Simon at Palm Skin Productions for the music. This ad-free podcast would not be possible without listener support, so if you feel you are able, please consider signing up to the Check Your Thread Patreon. For the equivalent of buying me a coffee each month, you'll be making it possible to continue producing regular episodes. Links can be found in the show notes and on the website checkyourthread.com. I hope you'll listen again next week. Until then, take care. Bye!